Coming up on Arirang News, the cold wave is in full swing in South Korea, with people in Seoul today waking up to the coldest morning this winter so far. The feels-like temperature plunged below minus 22 degrees Celsius in some parts of the country. South Korea's Supreme Court upholds two lower court rulings in favor of the Korean victims of wartime forced labor during Japan's 1910 to 1945 colonial rule, ordering Japanese firms to compensate them. On the other hand, Seoul and Tokyo today held high-level economic talks for the first time in 8 years. After more than 2 weeks past the scheduled deadline, South Korea's National Assembly passes next year's budget bill worth more than $500 billion. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. An extreme cold spell is battering South Korea, with some parts of the country experiencing a feels-like temperature of below 22 degrees Celsius. With the Arctic cold snap freezing the whole country, the west coast and the southern region are blanketed under heavy snowfall. Our Lee Soo-jin leads us off.
The Arctic cold wave has swept across South Korea this week. Temperatures in Seoul on Thursday morning plummeted to minus 14 degrees Celsius, marking the coldest morning of this winter so far. And it feels like temperatures dropped to a bitterly cold minus 22.3 degrees Celsius. Even on Jeju Island, located south of the Korean peninsula, temperatures there have fallen below 0 degrees. The highest daytime temperatures in most areas of the country were below 0, and this cold is expected to continue until Saturday morning. People in Seoul are battling the bitter winter chill.
I didn't really notice the cold up to 2 days ago, but today my ears and nose feel like they're frozen.
I arrived in Seoul on 18th of December, and I think today is the coolest.
But the bitter cold winter is definitely being felt by the entire country, not just the capital. Heavy snowfall warnings are in effect for the west coast of Chungcheongnam-do province and the Jeollado provinces. Heavy snow is to remain in the forecast for western coastal areas and the southern resort island of Jeju Island, where heavy snow of up to 30 centimeters is expected until Thursday night. There have also been many reports of water meters freezing. According to the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters on Thursday, as of 11 p.m. on Wednesday, a total of 72 cases have been reported. Earlier, the Ministry of Interior and Safety also upped its heavy snow warning level from caution to alert starting at 8 p.m. on Wednesday, raising the emergency response from level 1 to level 2. Over on Hallasan Mountain on Jeju Island, there was an accumulation of snow of up to 53.6 centimeters from Wednesday until 1 p.m. Thursday, and all 7 trails around the mountain have been closed off. And the slippery roads have already led to accidents. At 3:30 a.m. on Thursday, 9 vehicles, including a cargo truck and an intercity bus, collided on a highway in Chungcheongnam-do province, leaving the driver dead and 10 injured. And at around 5:37 a.m. in Jeju Island, a car skidded into a ditch and injured the driver. The KMA says the severe cold will continue until Saturday morning, while the Interior Ministry vowed to mobilize all available resources and minimize damage from heavy snowfall. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Moving on, South Korea's top court today upheld rulings that ordered Japanese companies Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Nippon Steels to compensate the Korean victims of wartime forced labor, some 10 years after those suits were filed. Our correspondent Choi Min-jung explains.
South Korea's Supreme Court has once again ruled in favor of Korean victims of forced labor during Japan's colonial rule between 1910 to 1945. The top court on Thursday upheld rulings that ordered 2 Japanese firms to compensate the victims. Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Nippon Steel are ordered to pay a maximum of 150 million won, or around $115,000 to each victim. Combined with extra damages for the delay, they are ordered to pay around $900,000 in total. A total of 11 plaintiffs won the ruling, 4 against Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and 7 against Nippon Steel. However, all the plaintiffs have died of old age since the lawsuit was first filed 9 years ago. Thursday's rulings were the first such outcomes by the top court since 2018. Back then, the South Korean court made landmark rulings on separate forced labor cases, ordering the 2 Japanese companies to compensate other former Korean victims. The 2018 ruling soured relations between South Korea and Japan, as Tokyo argued that related issues were completely settled under a 1965 bilateral agreement. Japan's reaction is not much different this time around.
These rulings are in clear violation of Article 2 of the Japan-Korea Claims Agreement and are extremely regrettable and absolutely unacceptable. We have protested this matter to South Korea.
As the defendants Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Nippon Steel are likely to continue refusing to pay the compensation, the government is expected to compensate the victims using funds procured through a public foundation. The plan was announced earlier this year to improve relations with Japan.
In line with the government's compensation plan announced in March, we plan to pay the compensation and damages for delay through the Foundation of Victims of Forced Mobilization by Imperial Japan.
With such a plan already in place and taking into account Japan's continued denial, it's unlikely that the Japanese firms will pay the compensation themselves. The Japanese companies have yet to pay the previously ordered compensation, claiming the statute of limitations has passed. But for the very first time, the court on Thursday clarified that this would not be allowed. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
And against this backdrop, Seoul and Tokyo today revived a long-stalled economic dialogue with a focus on economic security and technology cooperation. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has the details.
For the first time in 8 years, the foreign ministries of South Korea and Japan held high-level economic talks and highlighted the importance of bilateral cooperation. They took place at South Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Thursday afternoon, led by the Deputy Foreign Minister for Economic Affairs, Kang Jae-kwon, and Japan's Senior Deputy Foreign Minister, Keiichi Ono.
Regional, global, and multilateral cooperation between South Korea and Japan, which share liberal democracy and market economy, has become more important than ever, especially at a time when there's growing global economic uncertainty.
The Foreign Ministry said the two sides assessed their bilateral economic cooperation and discussed issues of mutual concern, including cooperation in economic security policies and regional and multilateral cooperation. They also decided to cooperate on securing new markets and stabilizing supply chains.
Japan and South Korea are important neighboring countries. As partners, I believe there is great potential for cooperation in terms of the economy, from supporting companies to establishing rules and responding to new tasks and technologies.
The ministry also said the two countries agreed to work together as partners pursuing common interests to ensure that the positive momentum leads to substantial economic cooperation. This is the 15th time that the two have held economic dialogue after it was first launched in 1999 to discuss comprehensive economic cooperation. It was last held in January 2016 in Tokyo. The Japanese government postponed the meeting in late 2016 when a statue of a girl symbolizing Korean victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery was built in front of the Japanese consulate in South Korea's port city of Busan. The meeting remained suspended as bilateral relations between Seoul and Tokyo worsened over several issues stemming from Japan's colonial rule of Korea before and during World War II. Then bilateral relations started to improve starting March this year, after South Korea announced its plan to compensate victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. The leaders of the two countries had agreed in July to resume the high-level economic dialogue by the end of this year. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, across the border, there has been more hostile rhetoric from North Korea as Kim Jong-un vows to resort to nuclear weapons to retaliate if provoked by nuclear weapons. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and his daughter Ju-ae on Wednesday took pictures with the Missile Bureau that carried out a launch drill for the Hwasong-18 intercontinental ballistic missile on Monday morning. This is according to the North state-run Korean Central News Agency on Thursday. There, the leader encouraged the Missile Bureau and said North Korea would not hesitate to carry out a nuclear attack if the enemy provokes it with nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, Kim Yo-jong, the younger sister of Kim Jong-un, issued a statement on Thursday in response to the UN Security Council emergency session that followed the North's missile launch. She said North Korea is, quote, deeply offended and strongly condemns the meeting, saying the UNSC is hosting conferences criticizing North Korea's right to self-defense. In response to Kim Yo-jong's remarks, a South Korean Notification Ministry official told reporters on the same day that North Korea is refusing to be part of a normal international community by repeatedly violating UN Security Council resolutions, an obligation under the UN Charter that all member states must abide by. The official also added that the South Korean government maintains the same stance that the North's regime would see an end if it were to use a nuclear weapon. Over at the National Assembly, where the National Defense Committee meeting took place, Defense Minister Shin Won-sik reiterated his stance to respond strongly against Pyongyang's continued military provocations.
North Korea has violated the September 19 military agreement around 3,600 times. The only thing that can curb North Korea's unwavering ambitions is great power.
The minister added that the South Korean military is maintaining a strong ROK-US alliance against Pyongyang's provocations. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
South Korea's defense ministry is considering various ways to contribute to the protection of the Red Sea route, which has become tense due to the Houthi, a pro-Iranian rebel group in Yemen, attacking civilian ships. During a press briefing on Thursday, ministry spokesperson Chon Ha-gyu emphasized South Korea's stance, saying that freedom of navigation must be guaranteed in the region, and that's keeping in mind the country's national interest and international stature. This comes a couple of days after an official at the ministry attended a U.S.-led virtual conference where U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin asked the more than 40 participants for contributions to a multinational fleet that protects civilian ships in the Red Sea route. A notable change was spotted in South Korea's foreign policy in the year 2023. Looking back on the past year, our Yoon Jung-min had a chance to talk to VOA correspondent Jessica Stone and Japan correspondent for the Straits Times Walter Sim earlier. Take a look.
Jessica, first, back in April, Presidents Yoon and Biden adopted the Washington Declaration, and in August, they cemented their trilateral cooperation with Japan's Prime Minister Kishida through the Camp David principles. How does Washington assess its renewed relationship with Seoul and Tokyo, and what does it mean for the U.S. to align its collective efforts with allies and partners at a time when the stakes are high on the Korean Peninsula and around the world?
Well, we are seeing a deepening of the relationship, not only between the U.S. and South Korea, but between the U.S., South Korea, and Japan, because throughout the year, we've seen a series of meetings throughout the government. So according to the U.S., these alliances are critical. They're a critical part of countering North Korea's military and nuclear program, as well as its space satellite activities. Allegations that North Korea is providing weapons to Russia, which Moscow denies, in its fight against Ukraine. And allies are preparing for more North Korean threats in 2024. And so these are all kinds of reasons why the deepening of these ties, not just because of what's happening on the Korean Peninsula, but also because of North Korea's weapons proliferation around the world.
Right, there is a host of issues. And Walter, the relations between Seoul and Tokyo marked a turning point in March. By that, I meant the better trade relations and the two leaders' frequent meetings. What's the atmosphere in Tokyo like regarding a thaw in the bilateral relationship this past year?
Well, the atmosphere has definitely been very positive. So Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida obviously sees South Korean President Yoon as a foreign leader whom he can trust over their multiple meetings, as you pointed out. But of course, there are still obstacles to their relationship, such as the South Korean court ruling this month that ordered Tokyo to pay about 200 million won to each of the 16 comfort women defendants. But the fact that the news cycle has, at least in Japan, really moved on suggests that the government wants to really manage its ties with South Korea to prevent relations from worsening. Of course, this positive mood has spillover effects. It has really benefited cultural ties. So we see Korean food, Korean culture, Korean music, K-pop becoming extremely popular in Japan, I think.
And Walter, the leaders often describe North Korea's provocations as unprecedented this year. There was a rare Kim Jong-un Putin summit in September. Ever since that, Pyongyang's military ties with Moscow have gotten closer than ever. That really culminated with North Korea launching a military spy satellite with help from Russia as it continues to advance its nuclear and missile programs, as well as cyber threats. What are the power dynamics in East Asia like, involving China and Russia? Where does the Seoul-Washington-Tokyo security cooperation stand in this region?
Well, there definitely is cause, and I don't think the leaders were, overstating the threat when they described Pyongyang's provocations as unprecedented. So definitely there is a lot of room, as Jessica mentioned earlier, for very close security collaboration and coordination in the region between South Korea, the US, as well as Japan. But if I may add on to that, I also do see Japan and South Korea hoping to maintain stable relations with China. And this is obviously evident from their recent trilateral foreign ministers meeting in Busan. That ended in a pledge for a leader summit meeting as soon as possible. As Jessica pointed out, if tensions were to rise even further over the Taiwan Strait, Japan and the United States would surely want to involve the South Korean security apparatus even more, alongside the US forces in South Korea, to help contain tensions over the Taiwan Strait as well.
Jessica, eyes are on the 2024 U.S. presidential election. How might the election results affect its bilateral ties with South Korea and the three-way cooperation with Japan? Are we going to see a dramatic change in policy regarding the Korean Peninsula depending on the election results?
I think the linchpin to answer that question is whether or not Joe Biden wins, in which case we'll see a continuation of the existing policy of deepening alliances throughout the Indo-Pacific between the U.S. and its Indo-Pacific partners. But if Donald Trump wins, who is the leading nominee in the Republican fight, we're likely to see some possible changes, particularly in the U.S.-South Korea relationship.
Walter Shim, Japan correspondent of the Straits Times, and Jessica Stone, correspondent of Voice of America. Thank you for your time. South Korea's National Assembly has passed the budget bill for 2024 that's been long overdue due to partisan disputes, particularly over cuts in research and development. Our Moon Hye-ryun has the details.
After months of debate, the country's spending plans for the coming year are set. The National Assembly passed the budget bill in a plenary session on Thursday. While the statutory processing deadline was almost 3 weeks ago, the two rival parties had failed to reach an agreement until now. There's been several changes made to the proposal submitted by the Finance Ministry in August, from the total budget to how much has been allocated to each sector. The total budget is some 656.6 trillion Korean won, or roughly $500 billion US. But that's around $180 million lower than the proposed amount. Fiscal soundness is becoming increasingly important due to the country's rising debt to GDP ratio. The projected debt to GDP ratio for 2024 is 51%. As a result, the government proposed cutting the budget for the R&D, education and public administration sectors to reduce spending. But the unprecedented slash in the research and development sector sparked debate, as it's the first time since 1991 that R&D has seen a decrease compared to the year before, with the proposed budget seeing a 16.6% drop from 2023. The final budget saw increases in budgets for science and technology, industry, SMEs and energy, social welfare and transport, but drops in public administration and local government budgets, as well as a decrease in the national defense budget compared to the proposal. The budget bill proposed earlier this year had a focus on strengthening social welfare, and this was reflected in the final spending plan for 2024. There was a concentration on supporting young people in particular. An additional $53 million designated for extending housing support for young people, and nearly $17 million for an initiative to give young people discounts for using public transport. It's not just young people, however, who will be benefiting from the changes in the budget proposal. An extra $4.3 million has been added to support farmers and fishermen with their electricity bills, and the pension system for the handicapped will see the biggest rise since 2013 with an additional $21 million. Meanwhile, the development project in the reclaimed wetland area of Saemangum was another major point of contention, and the two parties agreed to increase its budget by $230 million. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports climbed 13% on-year in the first 20 days of December, led by chips and automobiles. According to data from the Korea Customs Service released Thursday, outbound shipments reached $37.82 billion from December 1st to 20th, compared with the $33.53 billion tallied a year earlier. Exports of semiconductors advanced 19.2% during the cited period. In November, exports gained for the second straight month after a year-long downturn. In the stock market, South Korea is easing the shareholding threshold so that fewer investors are subject to capital gains tax. The Finance Ministry announced on Thursday that starting from January 1st next year, it is to raise the tax levying bar to those holding 5 billion won or $3.8 million worth of shares in a single company. Under the current system, investors who own 1 billion won worth of shares in a single company are considered large stockholders and need to pay tax of up to 25% on their gains. The official said this change is to reduce the market volatility caused by those large shareholders who sell off stocks at the year-end to avoid this tax. Justice Minister Han Dong-hoon has stepped down from his post and accepted the ruling People Power Party's proposal to chair its Emergency Leadership Committee. This is according to the party's floor leader and its acting chairman Yoon Jae-ok on Thursday. It's expected the official appointment will take place on Tuesday and the launch of the committee within this year. This follows the resignation of the former party leader Kim Ki-hyun under pressure to regain voter confidence ahead of the general election in April. The main opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung congratulated Han and said he hopes Han will thoroughly fulfill his responsibilities as leader.
In addition to the strong Arctic cold wave, gusty winds lead the wind chill to drop well into sub-zero temperatures. The strongest cold wave of around -15 degrees Celsius will continue tomorrow, staying until the day after tomorrow. The number of winter diseases is increasing rapidly in this freezing winter. Please take care. There is an emergency of heavy snow on the west coast and Jeju Island. By tomorrow, more than 60 centimeters of snow is expected in the mountainous areas of Jeju Island and more than 40 in western Jeollabuk-do province. The western part of Jeollanam-do and the west coast area of Chungcheongnam-do province will also receive more than 20 centimeters. Looking at the temperatures tomorrow, lows in Seoul tomorrow will start off at -15 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will get up to -7, Daegu and Gyeongju -2 degrees Celsius. The west coast will have snow until tomorrow, and Jeju Island will have snow throughout the weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with the AI headline news. Stay warm.